This hearing of the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigation will come to order. We welcome our witnesses and my colleagues, and I would like to welcome in particular some of the members of the audience who are here today. Michael Stumo, Nadia Milleran, Adnan Stumo. They are the parents and brother of Samia Rose Stumo. If you want to stand, you're welcome to with your photographs. Also here are Chris Moore, Clarice Moore, and David Moore, the parents and brother of Danielle Moore. Zipporah Curia is here today. She's the daughter of Joseph Curia. Catherine Bertay, she is the mother of Camille Bertay. Abadu Amiha is also here. His wife, Sarah Gabre Michael, was the cabin supervisor on Ethiopia Flight 302. We remember them and the other 341 victims of the unspeakable tragedies that occurred when two airlines crashed in 2018, 2019. I also want to recognize the family of John Barnett, his mother Vicki Stokes and brother Rodney Barnett, a Boeing whistleblower who committed suicide under the immense pressure that the company put on him for raising safety claims. They are with us today. To all of you, thank you for having the strength and courage to be with us, and we are deeply sorry for your losses. I wanted to begin by introducing you because the issues before us today have real human consequences, life and death results, not just abstract numbers and hypotheticals, abstract issues. They are a matter of life and death for people who travel by air or work for Boeing. And this hearing is a moment of reckoning. It is about a company, once an iconic company known for engineering excellence and product prowess, that somehow lost its way. 5 years ago, 346 innocent people lost their lives in not one, but two preventable tragedies. We learned those tragedies were caused by intentional decisions to put production speed over safety and profits, stock price over people. In the wake of those tragedies, Boeing promised to turn itself around. Planes were grounded, executives were dismissed, promises were made. What we've seen since from whistleblowers is that, in fact, the manufacturing issues, the retaliation against whistleblowers, non-conforming parts, quality inspections skipped, and issues concealed from the FAA, evidence hidden, all have continued. And there is mounting evidence that the deferred prosecution agreement concluded in 2021 with the United States Department of Justice has been violated. In fact, there is near overwhelming evidence, in my view as a former prosecutor, that prosecution should be pursued. When you were named as Boeing's chief executive, Mr. Calhoun, We were told that you were the right person to correct course, and you committed to, quote, strengthen Boeing's safety culture and rebuild trust with our customers, regulators, suppliers, and the flying public. And for a while, some started to believe that Boeing might have changed. But then this past January, the facade literally blew off the hollow shell that had been Boeing's promises to the world. And once that chasm was exposed, we learned that there was virtually no bottom to the void that lay below. PSI started this investigation after current Boeing quality engineer Sam Salapur came forward to disclose alleged shortcuts in the production of 787 and 777 aircraft that could pose catastrophic safety risks over time, fastening of the fuselage to other parts. Mr. Salapur courageously recounted how he was isolated and transferred for refusing to stay silent about his concerns. Our investigation has proceeded since we first heard from him, and we have heard from many others. We have more than a dozen whistleblowers by this point, and we encourage more to come forward. We've collected that evidence. We've learned that Boeing's problems go deeper than one whistleblower or one incident or one line of aircraft. A mechanic in South Carolina told us about how when he and his colleagues raised concerns about directives to not follow policies and procedures, quote, we were ordered to just do it and told there were hundreds of others waiting in line outside the gate wanting our jobs. Another whistleblower from Washington State has brought us new evidence very recently. A Boeing employee, Sam Mohawk, quality assurance inspector in Renton, Washington, informed us that Boeing is improperly documenting, I'm quoting, non-conforming parts, possibly using them and installing them in airplanes. They are parts that are damaged or defective, out of specification. He said that he's been told by his superiors to conceal this evidence from the FAA and that he is being retaliated against. In fact, he's been threatened with termination. These are chilling allegations. They echo concerns raised by others like John Barnett, who made similar claims about practices at Boeing 787 manufacturing plant in South Carolina, and by Merle Myers, who came forward last month with additional related claims about a different plant in Washington. This new evidence is detailed in a memorandum that I shared with my colleagues, PSI members, earlier today. Without objection, I'd like to ask that this memorandum be entered into the record. Mr. Calhoun, you were brought in to the company as CEO. You had been on the board to turn this company around. You and your board of directors have a duty to your shareholders, but they will be deeply ill-served if you fail to correct course to confront the root cause of this broken safety culture. You have a duty to demand the highest safety standards and insist that every installation is properly documented and ensure that speak up means, in fact, speak up, not shut up, as it is meant all too often. Boeing needs to stop thinking about the next earning call and start thinking about the next generation. We're here because we want Boeing to succeed. Boeing needs to succeed for the sake of the jobs it provides, for the sake of local economies it supports, for the sake of the American traveling public, for the sake of our military. It's not enough for Boeing to shrug its shoulders and say, well, mistakes happen. This is not an industry where it's okay to cut corners, to reduce inspections, to take shortcuts, and rely on broken parts that happen to be sitting around. This is not an industry where it's okay to rush planes out the door because you need to meet a quarterly sales target. I feel you know all of what I am saying, but it's not enough to say it. Boeing has to do it. Boeing has to live it. In a country where air travel literally was invented with the ingenuity and exceptional American engineers of Boeing, where still the best workforce in the world in the aviation industry continues to come to work every day and do its best, there's absolutely no reason where we should not be the home of the preeminent airplane manufacturer in the world. Boeing is making some leadership changes, but they look more like management musical chairs, moving the same people to different roles within the company, people who may have been responsible and should be held accountable. The Department of Justice will conclude its investigation and make its independent decision about whether to prosecute. But for Boeing, regardless of that decision, it is a moment of reckoning and an opportunity to change a broken safety culture. With that, I turn to the ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To avoid repeating much of what you said, I'll just ask my written opening statement be entered in the record. I'd like to start out by offering my condolences to the family members and loved ones of those who were lost in the 737 crashes, the people in the audience here. I think those condolences are universal and shared by everybody here. I'd like to underscore what the chairman said, is that this committee, everybody in this room, I would say everybody in America wants Boeing and the airline industry to succeed. It's just crucial that they do so. You know, I come from a manufacturing background myself, supplying plastic packaging materials to the medical device industry. I understand quality systems. I also understand the difficult nature sometimes in meeting specifications. I understand the difficult nature in today's world of hiring people in a manufacturing setting. And I read a recent article that it's becoming more and more challenging for the airline industry as well. So there are many contributing factors to what has happened. And from my standpoint, the subcommittee's role is to highlight as many of those factors as possible, get everybody focusing on them, keeping pressure on the entire system. I think that's the other point I want to make, is there are many people. It's not just Boeing's CEO. It's not just Boeing's management team. The quality system that needs to provide assurance to the traveling public that it's safe to fly. And that's, in the end, that's what we want. I mean, I travel multiple times a week, almost exclusively on 737s. I have to admit, I get on those planes feeling pretty confident because I know of all the people involved, the suppliers, the manufacturing workforce, the multiple layers of management within Boeing. Certainly FAA plays a major role. I mean, I'm not a fan of big government, but we need government to do certain things, and one of them is the FAA doing its job of regulating the airline industry and the airline manufacturers to make sure that they have a perfect record. That's what we're talking about. You need perfection, and that's hard to achieve. The airlines themselves are huge participants in this, and I'm highly disappointed. I've spoken to airline CEOs, your customers, and I'm disappointed that they haven't been willing to come before Congress primarily to offer assurance to the traveling public that they have their maintenance systems in place. They have quality systems. They're checking and double checking the aircraft multiple times a day. And of course, the final quality control step is, and quality control personnel are the flight crew, the pilots. And personally, I would never travel on an autonomous plane. I don't care how good you have your quality systems. I want to make sure that I've got a pilot and a flight crew on that plane with me making sure that it's safe as best as we possibly can. So again, I think it's necessary that we hold these hearings. I wish the airlines would come in and explain their quality systems, their maintenance systems, again, with the whole goal of assuring the public that it's safe to fly today and in the future, and that they've got what problems exist, and there are obviously problems. They've got them in hand, and they're doing everything they can to fix those problems. So, again, appreciate the hearing. Mr. Calhoun, thank you for coming here. You'll be asked some tough questions here. I appreciate the phone conversation we had, and you know what you're in here for. So I appreciate you coming here. With that, I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Johnson. Just to assure you, we are hopeful that the airlines will be coming to appear before this subcommittee. We welcome two witnesses today. David Calhoun has served as President and Chief Executive Officer of Boeing since January 2020. Prior to taking this role, he served as a member of Boeing's Board of Directors since 2009. He served as its chairman from October to December 2019. He began his career at General Electric Company, GE, where he spent 26 years, including as vice chairman of the company and president and CEO of GE Infrastructure. He's accompanied today by Howard McKenzie, chief engineer of the Boeing company. Howard McKenzie has been chief engineer, and he leads the Boeing engineering function. He is responsible for oversight of all aspects of safety and technical integrity of Boeing products and services. Mr. McKenzie has been with Boeing for more than 3 decades. Thank you both for being here. Our practice is to swear in all of our witnesses, so if you would please stand and raise your right hand. Do you promise that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Mr. Calhoun, you may proceed.
Chairman Blumenthal, Ranking Member Johnson, members of the subcommittee, thank you for inviting me to appear before you today, along with Boeing's chief engineer, Howard McKenzie, seated to my right. Before I begin my opening remarks, I would like to speak directly to those who lost loved ones on Lion Air Flight 610 and the Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302. I would like to apologize on behalf of all of our Boeing associates spread throughout the world, past and present, for your losses. They've done it down the range. I apologize for the grief that we have caused. And I want you to know we are totally committed to your memory to work and focus on safety for as long as we're at the Again, I'm sorry. Nearly every second, a Boeing commercial or defense product takes off and lands somewhere around the world, making us responsible for the safety of millions of passengers and flight crews every day, including our men and women in uniform. Aerospace safety is built on a robust industry-wide system that relies on self-disclosure, accountability, and continuous learning. This scrutiny, to be held to the very highest standard, is fundamental to why commercial aviation is by far the safest mode of transportation today. I come from this industry, and I know full well that this is an industry where we simply must get it right every single time. I've served as president and CEO of Boeing since January of 2020, following these tragic accidents. I joined the aviation industry as president and CEO of GE Aircraft Engines. My introduction to aerospace safety was after the tragic accident in 1989 of United Airlines Flight 232 in Sioux City, Iowa, due to an uncontained engine failure. It led to sweeping changes in our industry's safety management processes and contributed significantly to flight safety going forward. And from this experience, I understand the gravity of Boeing's role in upholding the integrity of aerospace safety in our industry. We deeply regret the impact that the Alaska Airlines Flight 1282 accident had on Alaska Airlines team and its passengers. And we are grateful to the pilots and crew for safely landing the plane. We are thankful that there were no fatalities. From the beginning, we took responsibility and cooperated transparently with the NTSB and the FAA in their respective investigations. In our factories and in our supply chain, we took immediate action to ensure the specific circumstances that led to this accident could never happen again. Importantly, we went beyond to look comprehensively at our quality and manufacturing systems, and we slowed things down dramatically. To launch this more comprehensive look, we've held stand-downs in our plants, and we've listened to our employees and acted on their ideas. We've brought in an independent quality expert to assess our processes, and we have announced our intention to reacquire Spirit Aerosystems, the manufacturer of our fuselage. In consideration of these inputs, Boeing developed a comprehensive safety and quality action plan with very specific metrics which we will use to hold ourselves accountable and the FAA will use to provide the oversight required. Most importantly, it is our people, over 170,000 around the world, who are our greatest strength. We've asked every one of our employees to consider themselves an aviation safety advocate. We're committed to making sure every employee feels empowered to speak up if they see a problem. We also have strict policies that prohibit retaliation against employees who come forward. It is our job to listen, regardless of how we obtain feedback, and handle it with the seriousness it deserves. Much has been said about Boeing's culture. We've heard those concerns loud and clear. Our culture is far from perfect, but we are taking action and we are making progress. We understand the gravity, and we're committed to moving forward with transparency and accountability while elevating employee engagement every step of the way. Our airplanes have carried the equivalent of more than double the population of the planet. Getting this right is critical for our company. It's critical for our customers who fly our planes every day, and it's critical for our country. We're part of a global ecosystem composed of manufacturers, suppliers, airlines, airports, air traffic controllers, and regulators. And they're all committed to learning from every incident. It is this relentless focus on improvement that has led to our industry's unparalleled safety record. And it is with this mindset, we're taking comprehensive action to strengthen safety and quality. And we know, as America's premier aerospace manufacturer, this is what you and the flying public have every right to expect from us. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Howard and I will be happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Calhoun. We will have 7-minute rounds. I'll begin. Mr. Calhoun, more than 5 years after the MAX crashes, you're once again making promises and seeming commitments. They seem highly aspirational. They are very general to correct course. Do you think Boeing has done enough to date to make those kinds of corrections? And what would you say to the whistleblowers who have come forward and faced retaliation?
Senator, thank you for the question. I ask myself that question every day. Have we done enough? I will remind everyone the findings and the accidents. And we all participated in the investigative work. We saw the conclusions by virtue of the NTSB reports and the local regulators' reports. These issues were attributed to the development of the airplane and a software package referred to as MCAS. And there we took responsibility. for that error.
You
So you're-
accept that Boeing was responsible for those crashes and 346
I
deaths?
accept that MCAS and Boeing are responsible for those crashes. Yes, sir.
But has enough been done to date already?
So this is the answer to that question. The development process for an airplane starts with an engineering effort. So we have revamped our engineering effort at large. We have created a series of design practices, including a new one referred to as human factors. It speaks directly to the work that needed to be done to prevent MCAS from creating the environment that those pilots faced at that moment. So we did that. We established a safety management system. We learned from the FAA and from our airline customers what it was and how to implement it. We've been listening to it. We tuned that safety management system into every airplane that flies every second of every day, so that we could learn from those airplanes.
Let me be more specific, and I apologize for interrupting, but we're limited in terms of time. Boeing has a code of conduct that states, and I quote, "I will never retaliate against or punish anyone who speaks up to report a concern," end quote. And yet, the whistleblowers that we have heard, including testifying before this committee, have reported a host of retaliatory behaviors, from reassignment to exclusion from key meeting to being sidelined and sidetracked in their careers, verbal harassment and threats, and even physical violence. After whistleblower John Barnett raised his concerns about missing parts, he reported that his supervisor called him 19 times in one day and 21 times another day. And when Barnett asked his supervisor about those calls, he was told, quote, "I'm going to push you until you break." He broke. When whistleblower Sam Mohawk raised concerns about Boeing's concealment of non-conforming parts, he was put in charge of completing corrective action investigations with an impossible deadline, and then threatened with formal discipline, including firing. He couldn't meet that deadline. When I hear about these experiences, I wonder whether Boeing really wants change. How can you reassure us that Boeing is going to, in fact, end this broken safety culture?
Senator, I'm going to start by assuring you that I listened to the whistleblowers that appeared at your hearing. Something went wrong. And I know the sincerity of their remarks.
Well, let me ask you a more specific...
And then, with respect to our company, we do have a policy. I often cite and reward the people who bring issues forward, even if they have huge consequence on our company and our production levels, et cetera. My leadership team does that. We survey our people with respect to, do they feel empowered to speak up? That survey performance gets better and better. It's never perfect. We work hard to reach out to our people. Immediately following Alaska, we had a stand down. The stand downs continue, and they rotate, and we listen to everybody. I'm trying to deal with 30,000 ideas on how we can move forward. How do we make their jobs easier? How do we train them more effectively? How do we do that? Our team we are working hard to listen.
Mr. Calhoun, let me ask you, how many of your employees have been fired for retaliating against whistleblowers?
Senator, I don't have that number on the tip of my tongue, but I know it. I know it happens. I know it happens. I am happy to follow up and get you that number.
I would appreciate your following up. Let me ask you, have any of your supervisors, your managers, anybody been fired for retaliating against people who speak truth to power about defects or problems in production?
Senator, we have fired people and disciplined people, and I am happy to follow up with what you need.
Who have you fired, and how have they been disciplined?
I can't I have concern on privacy, and as you know, every one of those cases.
But will you come back to this committee and tell us?
I will most certainly get back to you, sir.
Let me ask you, have you been aware of how Boeing has complied with requests for information from this committee?
Probably not by line item. No, sir.
Well, let me show you a sample of the data produced by Boeing in response to requests by this committee. I'll show you a bigger display, and the details have been provided to you. Are you able to make sense of this?
No, sir.
Complete gobbledygook.
Yes, sir.
This is what Boeing has provided to this committee in response to our requests for information. Can you justify these productions?
I will, I would describe it precisely as you did, and I can't justify. And I will most definitely follow up.
My time has expired on this first round, and we're going to try to stick to the time limits because we have a number of colleagues here, and I want everybody to have a first round. We will have a second round for colleagues who want to do it. I turn now to the ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To pick up where the chairman just left off, you said you'll check into that. Did you talk to the individual responsible for complying with our information requests? Have you had a meeting with that individual or that group of individuals?
Senator Johnson, my team knows, and I have talked to them about the need for transparency at every level and every stage. So beyond that, as a backdrop, no, I did not review each line item.
So who would be your direct report responsible for providing this committee the information, the subcommittee the information it requested?
Yeah, it'll be a combination of my counsel and my government affairs office.
Okay, so you'll talk to them today about this?
Yes, well, they're right behind me, and so I'm sure, yes, it's registered.
You said you've listened to the whistleblowers. Have you directly spoken to any of the whistleblowers?
I have not directly spoken to any of the whistleblowers.
Do you think that'd be a good idea to do that?
Yeah, I think it would.
I'd recommend it.
Yep.
Exactly what are you doing then to investigate the whistleblower complaints? If you haven't spoken to them directly,
Yes, sir.
I mean, again, have you just turned it over to your counsel or?
No, we have a team. We have an ethics hotline and a team of investigators. The most important thing in every whistleblower out of the chute is to make sure we understand the substantive issue that is being discussed and do safety analysis immediately. And go out and interview everybody that's involved and or has touched any of that work and assure ourselves that we have safe airplanes. And if there are corrective actions to take with respect to the points that they make with us, that's what we do. And we try to get on that immediately. But there's always an objective view and a number of perspectives, particularly with respect to engineering disciplines that have to come to bear on it.
So how many employees does Boeing have?
170,000.
So having run a much smaller operation, I mean, first thing I can say is I realize that I don't control what everybody does. You try and set policies. You can communicate as clearly as possible. People are people. The question I have for you, because it's actually quite shocking to have a supervisor calling somebody up 19 times in one day, you know, and making the statement that I'm going to break you. My guess is you don't condone that kind of behavior. Have you looked at your incentive system within Boeing? And let's face it, there's obviously pressure on your sales, from your sales force to your manufacturing operation to deliver the planes that they've sold to airlines. Again, there's pressure throughout companies, and I can just imagine that the pressure is being applied to Boeing associates throughout the company. Okay, I get that. I've been in manufacturing. But have you reviewed, for example, your incentive systems that maybe would drive that kind of behavior, having to meet quotas have you reviewed that?
Yeah, this year we made a number of significant changes to our incentive structure that really emphasizes all things safety, including the running a just culture with that respect. And a just culture I think, is the environment that you would like us to run. And so yes, that incentive alignment is now in place.
So prior to our last hearing, one of the articles I read, whether fair or unfair, talked about, and your disclosures, it's probably the SEC, where you were scoring high on ESG and DEI, and your score was 0 on your quality. These are internal quality performance measures. Can you speak to that report?
That's a fact.
Because the point being is,
Yes.
is Boeing's management, are they concentrating on DEI and ESG and at the expense of really meeting your quality performance measures?
Senator, I've never seen those two things ever come into conflict. I don't believe my team has ever allowed for them to come into conflict in any way.
It's not necessarily conflict, it's what you're emphasizing, where are you putting your management emphasis?
Yes. Well, again, Senator, there's a comp system. There's also what we work on every day, all day, knowing how important and critical it is for the future of our company. Safety and quality is it. It's been that way since January of 2020 because of what we have been responding to. Safety and quality. That is what we talk about.
I'll mention another article, and the reason I'm doing this is one of the reasons we need a free press. It'd be nice to have a completely unbiased free press, but we need investigative reporting. We only have so much staff here at a subcommittee level or even a committee level, so we really do need journalists going out there and digging up stories. One of the ones I thought interesting before this hearing spoke to the very real problem, the difficulty you are having in finding, well, first of all, your workforce, manufacturing workforce is aging. Throwing COVID on there, early retirements, that type of thing, you lost a lot of experience. And in the past, it sounds like Boeing was able to tap into a workforce that had experience in the aerospace industry. And you don't have that luxury anymore. I'm not exactly sure when that changed. I know, coming from manufacturing myself, it's been difficult to hire people in a manufacturing operation because, let's face it, we tell our kids, you got to get a 4-year degree and you want to be in management. So we don't encourage people to go into manufacturing. But can you speak to that issue, or maybe Mr. McKenzie can speak to that issue in terms of just your challenges in hiring people in a manufacturing setting for a very high-quality, high-demand aerospace industry?
Senator Johnson, and I appreciate the question more than you know. The post-COVID moment in the aerospace industry has been unbelievably difficult to navigate. We have 10,000 suppliers. We put almost 2.5 million parts into a 787. Boeing, because it's big and it has resources, even those were strained, we were able to keep more than most. But like you say, we turned over a lot of people, and yes, a lot of experienced people. Our supply chain experienced enormous turnover. So as we try to respond to unbelievable demand for airplanes out there, we have a supply constraint that is very real, and it is not resolved today. And I think one of the most important things we can do, we've done it in a few large instances, but now we have to train ourselves to do it at small instances, meaning every employee. If a part's not there on time, if a part's non-conforming, we will stop the line. So much of this relates to an untrained workforce. I tell you, it's all about that, honestly.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Calhoun.
Senator Hassan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Ranking Member Johnson, for holding this hearing. To the families and loved ones of the people we have lost to Boeing safety failures, our condolences, and thank you for continuing to advocate for your loved ones and for airline safety generally and for the safety of the public. Mr. Calhoun, it seems like every other day news breaks of a new problem or safety concern with Boeing aircraft. In just the last week, there has been one news story about questionable titanium in your supply chain and another story about incorrectly installed fasteners with your new 787 Dreamliners. There have been major problems with Boeing's manufacturing, assembly, and quality assurance. As Senator Blumenthal noted, Americans built the first ever airplanes more than a century ago. But now, for the first time in decades, Americans are more and more nervous about flying your American-made planes. That breakdown in trust is a remarkable failure for your company, and I'm concerned that it stems from a decision to put profits ahead of safety. So what are the root causes of this systemic failure? How are you going to fix it? And who should we hold accountable? Does the buck stop with you or with somebody else?
Senator Hassan, I appreciate the question, and like you, I get the media input every day, and I see a Boeing description of the airplane. Two out of every 3 airplanes that fly in this country are Boeing airplanes. The contributing causes to most everything outside of the Alaska accident relate to a variety of inputs that are downstream with respect to operating and maintenance and et cetera with an airplane. Alaska was a manufacturing defect. I'm not aware of any others that were. And we cannot allow one unsafe airplane to leave our factory. And so we are totally focused on everything that may have contributed to that. I will say this, every issue that occurs out in the field with an airplane, our industry doesn't actually point fingers at each other. We all rally around whatever happened. And if the manufacturer can contribute to that, to fixing that once and for all, we will.
So let me just follow up here, because you have talked about a culture of safety and quality. You say that's what we talk about, and I hear you talking about it. But what we've been trying to get to is, how is it that you had a 2020 failure, a 2024 failure, the failures I've just read about, so there were 737 failures, now these 787 ones. You talk about safety and culture, but you aren't answering the question about what the root causes are here. How do you make sure that safety and culture, safety and quality is your product as opposed to your words?
Well, we do, and I will always refer to the record with respect to airplane safety. 2023, IATA is the international organization that compiles all the information with respect to safety incidents, was the safest year on record. Boeing's a large part of that.
I understand that, and what I'm going to ask you to do is produce to us the documents that you have, or the understanding you have, of what are the root causes of the safety problems your company has had. Because I appreciate the context and I appreciate the answer, but as the chair and the ranking member have noted, we have limited time here. So I'm going to move on to my next question, but what I would assume now, 4 years after the 737 MCAS issue, what I would assume is by now you would have identified root causes for some of these safety problems. And what I'm not hearing is an answer back. Let me move on to another issue, which is that one of whistleblower protection. In April, a Boeing engineer told this committee that he raised safety concerns with leadership at Boeing about some of the company's manufacturing processes. He told us that Boeing management then retaliated against him for raising those safety concerns. He went so far as to tell us that he felt that his physical safety had been threatened. Not only has your company failed to uphold the highest safety standards, it appears that Boeing has fostered a culture that censors people who try to speak up and help. So what actions have you personally taken as CEO? I heard your testimony about listening, but what actions have you personally taken as CEO to investigate instances of retaliation and intimidation at Boeing and to hold managers and leadership accountable for punishing whistleblowers?
Senator, I'll start again with respect to leadership and culture, communication. We are always out there with respect to our policy on retaliation. Not accepted. We will take the disciplinary actions that are necessary, and we do have a process. If I get a retaliation claim, I have a team. Again, they're independent. They are meant to investigate that, and they're meant to assume that that allegation is correct. Let's go find out. They are not always determined to be correct. They are not always.
I would suggest, because you couldn't answer how many folks have been disciplined or fired for retaliation, I would suggest that a personally involved CEO might be able to get us that information, and that if you talked about the discipline that you took towards people who retaliated against whistleblowers, there might be less retaliation. Let me move on to one final issue here. News broke last week that the Federal Aviation Administration is investigating how counterfeit titanium, originally from a Chinese supplier, made its way into Boeing planes. What systemic failures allowed Boeing to not only purchase questionable titanium, but to fail to recognize that it was substandard once you had it in your possession and to install it in an aircraft? How'd that happen?
Senator, I appreciate the question. We did not purchase the titanium. A sub-tier would have purchased that titanium, and we would not be aware until they raised their hand and let us know, in which case we would help them immediately solve that problem. Back when Russia invaded Crimea, we made a determination immediately following that invasion that we would end our dependency on Russia for titanium. And we've done quite a good job. And the only other point, the material that we have seen in the parts that our vendors have notified us of has not been substandard. It has met the spec.
So, and my time is expired, but I would ask you to follow up on what product quality testing Boeing does and conducts of the materials and parts it purchases in order to verify the authenticity and safety of materials that come through the supply chain. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Senator Hassan. Senator Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Calhoun, what is it that you get paid currently?
Senator, that's well disclosed in our proxy documents in each of the years that I've been employed.
Yeah, but what is it?
It's a big number, sir.
Well, let me help you out. It's $32.8 million this year. Does that sound right?
Yes, it does.
That's a 45% increase over last year. Does that sound right?
Yes, it does.
What is it you get paid to do exactly?
I get paid to run the Boeing company.
Yeah. So just help me understand that. I mean, do you get paid for transparency? Is that one of the metrics for your income?
I think the board counts on me for transparency.
Really? Because you're under investigation for falsifying 787 inspection records. The Boeing's under criminal investigation for the Alaska Airlines flight. You were investigated by DOJ for criminal conspiracy to defraud the FAA. This is all in your tenure. This doesn't sound like a lot of transparency to me. What about safety? Is that a component of your salary?
It sure is, Senator.
You know, have you seen the reports that the subcontractor that you used to make that door piece that fell out of the sky, that when the FAA went and toured the facility, they found one door seal being lubricated with Dawn liquid dish soap and cleaned with a wet cheesecloth, and another was being checked with a hotel room key card. Does that sound like safety to you?
Senator, I think our relationship with that particular supplier has been well documented, reviewed by the FAA, and most certainly us. And I'm very intent on acquiring that company so that none of that ever happens.
You know, the FAA also says that Boeing still has not implemented the recommended steps back from 2019 and 2020 after the MAX crashes. You still have not taken the appropriate safety procedures or implemented what they recommended. I mean, how, if safety is a component of your $33 million compensation package, I mean, how can you possibly qualify for any of this? What about quality? Is quality part of your compensation package?
Senator, I meet with the FAA pretty regularly. They don't hold anything back, and I'm not aware of anything that has been cited with respect to those accidents that we haven't taken action on.
Really? Because we've had whistleblowers. You said you'd listen to whistleblower testimony. We've had multiple whistleblowers come before this committee and allege that Boeing is cutting every possible corner on quality and safety, not just in the past, but now. They've alleged that you've eliminated safety inspections, that there are fewer in quality and there are fewer inspectors doing quality inspections out there. They've alleged that when they raised quality issues and concerns, they were reassigned, they were retaliated against, they were physically threatened. That doesn't sound like attention to quality to me, and yet you're getting paid $33 million a year. It's extraordinary.
Senator, I We have increased our quality inspectors significantly.
How much has your stock price increased while you've been at Boeing?
It hasn't, and I don't watch it much.
Have you done any stock buybacks while you've been at Boeing?
Not in my job, no.
How about your profits? Have your profits increased at all while
I
you've
haven't
been?
had any profits, sir.
I'm sorry?
I have not had any profits.
Yeah. You know, I think the truth is, Mr. Calhoun, you're not focused on safety, you're not focused on quality, you're not focused on transparency. All of this is in the record, but I think actually you're focused on exactly what you were hired to do, which is that you're cutting corners, you are eliminating safety procedures, you are sticking it to your employees, you are cutting back jobs because you're trying to squeeze every piece of profit you can out of this country, this company. You're strip mining it. You're strip mining Boeing. It was one of the greatest American companies ever. It has employed thousands of people in my state, and you are strip mining it for profit, shareholder value, and you're being rewarded for it. You got a huge raise, a huge increase. So it's working out great for you. For the American people, they're in danger. For your workers, they're in peril. For your whistleblowers, they literally fear for their lives, but you're getting compensated like never before. Don't you think maybe your priorities are misplaced here? I mean, don't you think maybe it's time to get back to focusing on making quality planes and paying your workers well and taking care of the little guys who got you to where you are? That's not a rhetorical question.
Senator, I don't recognize any of the Boeing you described.
Really?
And I want to assure,
You don't recognize the Boeing that has airplanes falling out of the sky, that has had 2 Maxes crash, that has had pieces of doors fall out of the sky, that have had whistleblowers come before, they've sat right where you have sat and told us, these are your employees who have told us that when these are the engineers, by the way. Are you an engineer?
I'm not, sir.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
And they have said that they're not listened to, that they're retaliated against, that they're threatened. That's the reality of Boeing today. That's your company that you have created. Now, I don't recognize it either from the company it used to be decades ago, but under your leadership, that's what Boeing is, and you're being rewarded for it handsomely, handsomely. Don't you think there's something wrong with that? Why haven't you
Senator,
resigned?
You know, Senator, I stand by what I said, and I want to assure the great employees in your state that that is not the way we operate the company, and it never will be. And if you would like my chief engineer to talk about what he sees and
No,
hears.
I want to hear from you, because what I hear from you is a lot of this team does that and that team does that, and I listen to the whistleblowers, but I don't meet with them. And I've heard about all this stuff that you Congress have meddlesomely asked for because the public wants to see it, gosh darn them, but you actually haven't supervised any of it. I've heard that. It's a lot of it's this, it's that, it's this, it's that. But meanwhile, you're getting paid a heck of a lot of money. It's unbelievable. If anybody's coming out of this deal good, it's you. Why haven't you resigned?
Senator, I'm sticking this through. I'm proud of having taken the job. I'm proud of our
this
safety record, and I am
You're proud of
very
this safety
proud
record?
of our Boeing people.
You're proud of this safety record?
I am proud of every action we have taken.
Every action you've taken?
Yes, sir.
Wow. Wow. There's some news for you. Well, behind you can't see it. Behind you, the folks are showing pictures of the people who are the victims of your safety record. I think we can all see them. And I think the American public, when they fear to get on their airplanes, they understand your safety record. And frankly, sir, I think it's a travesty that you're still in your job.
Senator Butler.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to you and a ranking member for today's hearing. To the families who are here today, thank you for continuing to keep the legacy of your family strong and present, raising their voices at a time when there's so much attention being paid. You've not relented one bit. Even when you thought no one was listening. Thank you for staying on the case and for being here. Mr. Calhoun and Mr. McKenzie, thank you for your presence. I want to turn to the report to the FAA, Mr. Calhoun, the plan of action moving forward. There's not been a great deal of detail of that plan shared, but in your comments and testimony to the committee today, you highlight you say, and I quote, it's our people who are our greatest strengths. I think any executive, CEO, person who's run a business, a small organization knows that it fundamentally is the people who make the company strong. My colleague, Senator Hawley, was talking about how well you compensate. The chairman raised issues, concerns about are the people of your company seeing any accountability for behaviors that have led to us being in this place. You said yourself that the people who you tasked with responding to the information requests from this committee are sitting in this room, but I think you would agree that they have failed in representing the greatness of this American company. So I want to understand what is the plan relative to the people moving forward. There's a lot of words about training. There's a lot of words about, I tried to capture it as precisely as I could, better work instruction adherence. It implies that the workers are not adhering to the instruction and or training that you are currently providing. So I want to dig a little bit into understanding the specifics of the plan that you've offered to the FAA, to the American people, and to these families who are here about how it is that you are going to advance this plan relative to the important people that keep this company strong. Let me ask just a very specific question. What are the costs associated with the people part of your plan?
Depends on what aspect of it, but if it's in the training arena, it's well over $1 billion. Senator, a large part of the training needs relate to Senator Johnson's question with respect to turnover and the number of newer people that we have. In our stand-downs with all of our people, and I always believed, and I'm sure and certain that the best ideas will come from them. They gave us lots of great ideas on how they would train all the new people, how they would do most of that training on the job as opposed to the classroom. We dedicated many, many, many more hours to that training. We created...
I read it. It's about 300 additional hours that were dedicated to the...
We created a proficiency metric, not as a pay item, but simply recognition that from the senior folks, the junior folks are now proficient at the task and the job that they have. They know where the drawings are, they know the steps required to follow each of those drawings, and they don't need to have somebody next to them while they do it. So of all the issues that we heard for all of those people and 30,000 ideas, most focused on training.
So it's $1 billion, about.
Yes,
I won't hold you
something
to
north of $1 billion.
North of $1 billion dedicated to the implementation of the plan moving forward relative to people. Are those costs, are those dollars actually going to be dollars dedicated going into the pockets of Boeing workers around the world?
It will pay for all of the time and training that they get. It's not a compensation. This is an investment the company will make to take people off of an airplane job and make sure that we train them to be ready to do the airplane job.
So they're not going to be compensated for the additional training that
they get paid for every hour they're there, yes.
But now you have a more highly skilled worker.
Yes.
Theoretically.
Yeah.
And there's not additional, in this plan, there's not a...
They can proceed within like in the Puget Sound, along the Union. The more skills they accumulate, the better they'll get paid.
So,
the answer to that is yes.
So, and that's within the $1 billion?
No, no.
So that's what I'm trying to understand.
That would be straight compensation.
Right. I really want to understand.
I don't have the aggregate number for that.
Yeah.
I'm happy to provide that, at least with respect to the plan.
I would really like to understand, because I think if what you have said is, and the plan that you have moving forward is that that we need a more highly skilled workforce. I would assume that would mean a better compensated workforce that is now more highly skilled. And so
Yes.
I want to
Yes.
make sure that I understand that in particular. We're running out of time quickly. I want to pick up on a conversation that a couple of my colleagues have started out, in this notion of culture. And culture is incredibly important for it to last. It's really got to be something that is sticky. The chair asked about the number of workers that have been, or employees, managers, leaders that have been faced discipline for retaliation. What I would like to understand, and would love to get just a quick response from you about, is how do you plan to increase confidence in these new policies and the culture that you want your people, your greatest asset, to believe in, if there's no visible consequences for the behavior that is allegedly disallowed?
Again, with respect to how to motivate our teams, the most important
Well,
thing
I'm sure you believe that they're motivated because they're producing product.
Yeah.
And so it's not that, I'm not suggesting that they're not motivated. What I want, and I think what you want, is to have them to believe
Trust the
that
system.
and to trust that your leadership is going to keep the traveling public safe and is going to help them build a solid future for their family.
Yes.
Why should they trust you?
Well, first, we do celebrate people who give us information that helps our operation. And even if it doesn't, we celebrate their willingness to speak up. And we do it publicly. And we survey the results. Do you trust the system? And we get better and better and better feedback on that. And we have ways to go, and we have to keep working on that one. And yes, maybe there's a better way to communicate the disciplinary actions that we take. I am sensitive to the people who we take those disciplinary actions against. I think it's highly likely that in the immediate workspace, around wherever or whatever happened in those instances, there's a high level of awareness. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Butler. Senator Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Growing up, a lot of my friends, uncles, relatives worked for Boeing. And I remember a button. It said, if it's not Boeing, I'm not going.
Yep.
If it's not Boeing, I'm not going. Good jobs, great jobs working there. Mr. McKenzie, you worked for Boeing for several decades, I understand. What happened to the safety culture there?
Thank you for the question, Senator. Well, I'll tell you, I've been in this role at Boeing just over a year. As you noted, I've been at Boeing for well over 3 decades. I'm in my 37th year, starting out as an intern, going all the way through today. I can tell you that in the last several years, and I speak for the engineering team at Boeing, they are extraordinarily focused on safety. We've done several structural changes to the engineering function. We have aligned the engineering function into one organization. We now have the most engineers that ever populated the Boeing company inside Boeing, over 64,000 engineers. We have defined functional chief engineers for every one of our functional disciplines, including human factors. We have built out and developed a robust system of what's called design practices, where we are codifying every technical learning and lesson on how we do things at Boeing.
But sir, you're an engineer.
Yes, sir.
To solve the problem, you have to first identify the problem. There was a problem. What happened to the safety culture of Boeing? What did you identify as the problem?
Well, Senator, the presumption is that if you're talking specifically if you're talking specifically about the MAX, there were specific technical requirements that were in error. And to resolve those errors, we embarked on the design practice discipline structure.
Do you think that there was a culture, though, that safety was not first, from then until today?
I think in that particular instance, I think that the analysis that supported the decisions that were made at the time were in error. And I can't state exactly the threads that were drawn that created that error. But we've built a system to make that much more robust today, so that will never happen again.
Do you think that there's a culture of safety first today?
There's absolutely, within our engineering team, there's absolutely a culture of safety first. Whenever there's an issue or a problem, invariably, the very first question we ask is, what is the safety determination? We have a system called the Continued Operational Safety Program that addresses every single item coming out of our fleet every day. Every engineering leader in the company gets an email every day that identifies all problems that we go through again, a very methodical process, and we've been doing this for many years, that defines what the safety implications are, what the safety remedies are.
So what happened? What went wrong? How did we miss the mark?
Again, Senator, you asking about a specific issue? I'm talking about the broad process.
Well, I'm talking about doors flying off of planes. I'm talking about using parts that are misfits. I'm talking about planes crashing.
Well, Senator, the door issue was an issue in manufacturing, and I'm representing engineering. The engineering design of the door is not implicated. However, the engineering actions through all of that remain, as I explained, focused on every learning that comes out from the fleet, uses the robust processes that we have in conjunction with the FAA. They're all overseen by the FAA, and implements all safety precautions in the fleet from an engineering perspective here.
So certainly as I talk to aerospace engineers, they're absolutely convinced Boeing is engineered properly. They're absolutely solid airplanes. There's so many good things we could, and I talked to the pilots. The pilots love their Boeing airplanes. So many good things that they could just have enough good things to say about Boeing airplanes. So to me, it comes down to the fact that we're not executing the plan. We have good design. The planes are good, but we're not executing a plan perfectly. And that's what it takes, is there's no room for error in your industry. And if you cut corners, Mr. Calhoun, what went wrong? What happened? Again, it's designed right, the pilots love them, but yet we've had some pretty bad outcomes. What went wrong?
Yes, sir. The MAX accidents, again, tragic. The design was wrong. The NTSB reports, all of the investigative reports, specifically identified an error with MCAS. MCAS created an environment in the cockpit at a crucial moment.
Okay.
And,
then fast forward. Now
and
we're
so-
losing
and so
doors.
Ms.
Now we're using
and
misfit.
so, Mr. McKinsey, what he refers to is about probably half our people, engineering in particular, work on the development of airplanes, and half work in support of production operations. So with respect to the accidents, where we were focused in the description of the changes, and they're big and they're significant across the engineering department, we're focused on preventing the design problem from ever happening again. Human factors, a whole new team, a whole new approach, a set of disciplines around it, et cetera. Alaska, very different. That was a manufacturing miss. That is what our quality action plan is all about. I believe while there was a very discreet miss with respect to the documentation of removal of that door plug, which caused this to escape our factory, while that happened, and it was a discrete instance on one airplane, we have tried to look at literally everything we do to make certain that that can never happen again. And that is what our quality plan is about, and that is what we're up to. But that's a very different process, the production process, than the development process.
Thank you. I yield back.
Mr. Calhoun, let's put it very bluntly. 346 people died because of a faulty control system, the MCAS system, that Boeing knew was going to cause a crash at some point, correct?
I would not say the latter part of that sentence.
People at Boeing knew.
There was a judgment that was made by ourselves, our design engineers, and the certification process that that could never happen, but it did.
Well, now you're going to make me really angry, because the evidence shows, in fact, that the engineers working on this plane knew that that faulty control system drove the nose down under certain circumstances, and pilots, in fact, Lions Air and Ethiopian Air struggled to lift that nose as the plane plummeted toward the sea. And they couldn't do it because they didn't know what was happening. And the reason they didn't know what was happening is Boeing concealed it. They concealed it from the FAA, and therefore Boeing was charged with defrauding the United States of America. And the prosecution was deferred because Boeing paid a fine, but no individual was held accountable. In my view, and I said it at the time, individuals should be held accountable for those deaths. Don't you agree?
Senator, it's wrong for me to reinvestigate an investigation that was
I'm not
thorough,
talking about
thorough.
reinvestigating.
And-
I'm talking about a judgment. We're here about accountability. It is a moment of reckoning for Boeing that will help Boeing in the long run, because the only way to course correct is to face the truth and confront the need for action. And I'm asking you, shouldn't individuals be held accountable, individuals who are still at Boeing and who may be in positions of responsibility now?
Senator Blumenthal, we are responsible. We are responsible. The Department of Justice and the Boeing team and all the investigations and all the judgments that were ultimately taken, I'm not here to second guess them.
Only one individual was ever criminally prosecuted, a pilot. He was acquitted. And I'm saying to you, and I'm saying to the Department of Justice, individuals should be held accountable, because that's the only way that deterrence works. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, sir. I believe strongly in accountability.
Now, Boeing paid a criminal fine of $243 million, correct?
I don't know the precise number, but I assume that's
You
correct.
must know the precise number. You're the CEO of the company. It only happened 5 years ago.
5 years ago, and I
4 years ago.
Yep.
Boeing paid $243 million in a criminal penalty. It paid $500 million to the families who lost loved ones in the MAX crashes, and it paid $1.77 billion in compensation to airline customers. Those numbers correct?
Yes.
As to any of those amounts that were paid, was Boeing insured?
I don't have a precise number for you.
You don't have a precise number, but Boeing was insured.
Probably.
Therefore, Boeing didn't have to pay
Probably.
large amounts. Do you know how much?
I don't know the net amount, sir.
Let me ask you this. Did Boeing take tax deductions on any of those amounts to reduce the impact to the company?
And I don't have the answer to that either, sir.
You don't have the answer
I
as
don't.
the CEO of the company? I find that hard to believe.
I don't, sir.
Well, I would suggest that the prosecution that is, in my view, almost certainly to result from the investigation underway, and I say again, as former federal prosecutor and state attorney general, I think that the evidence is near overwhelming to justify that prosecution, that there ought to be individual accountability and amounts that really reflect the harm done that are not deductible. as those amounts were. And I would like you to report back to this committee as to what amounts were deducted and how much of those penalties and payments were covered by insurance. Will you commit to do that?
I will do that.
John Barnett went through 2 days of deposition. Have you read his deposition?
Yes, yes,
What was your reaction?
heartbroken.
Well, it was heartbreaking, that's for sure, but did it cause you to want to take some action against those employees who put pressure on him and threatened him?
Senator, now this was considerably before my time. I do know that that process was taken up by the governing authorities and was looked into, and they came out with a determination that I know nobody's satisfied with in the Barnett family, and I understand that, and I understand why. But it did go through a process, and I know the family will take exception to that process, and I understand it.
I'll turn to the ranking member for second round on his part.
See, I have colleagues here. Should I defer to either Senator Hawley or Senator Marshall? Well, I guess what I'd like to do, and maybe Mr. McKenzie would be the person to speak to this, or Mr. Calhoun. Again, the goal here is to reassure the public that they feel safe to fly. We want Boeing, we want the airline industry to succeed. So can one of you go through the entire quality and safety process that provides that assurance? I talked about all the players in that process, the suppliers, your manufacturing associates, your management, the FAA, which, by the way, the FAA has only turned 172 documents over this committee as well. They're not exactly, as is true in just about every government agency that I've tried to do oversight on, they're not very transparent. But the FAA, and then finally the airlines and their maintenance crews and the pilots. Can you just kind of talk the way through that, you know, even if Boeing doesn't reach perfection, you know, there are other steps beyond that to try and catch errors. So go through that process, please.
I'll start. I'll turn it over to Howard. Alaska was a manufacturing defect. It created an unsafe airplane. Perfection is what our job is, and it has to be absolute. We inspected every airplane that has that plug quickly. We know it was a single airplane. And as I said, for all of the media coverage of Boeing airplanes over the course of this year, I believe that was the only manufacturing defect that's related. Now, so what we do first is we close that down, period. We look at the value chain from the delivery of the airplane all the way back through our supplier. And we take dramatic steps to make sure that at every step of that value chain, that door could never leave the airplane in flight. This was related to our Spirit supplier. And I'll do this just for effect, and I'll let Howard cover a little more. We used to inspect those fuselages when they arrived at our factories. And we had a lot of inspection sites. And then we would fix all the nonconformances that we would find in those inspections in our factories. And it created more movement than we should have. So immediately following this accident, we moved 13 inspection stations down to Wichita. And we demanded that Spirit treat us as an inspection authority on their premise and treat it like an FAA ticket, so that not a single fuselage would leave that facility that wasn't in perfect condition to come to ours. That was a movement of roughly 200 inspection engineers to do that. And then it required probably at least that or double that from Spirit to help us man those stations so they could learn what this process is. So I say that just because that's how big this effort has been for us, and that is how we've done it. And we've then sent that message to every supplier with respect to perfection of the products that they deliver to us so that they can move through our line in regular order. Otherwise, we have launched a program on factory floor compliance, hygiene in the factory, pretty much everything, sir. And I know the FAA has paid an awful lot of attention to it. Howard, I don't know if you want to add to that. Yeah.
I want to go downstream as well. You know, once it leaves your factory, these planes are running for, I mean, how many thousands of hours, you know?
Yeah. Why don't you take them through the D checks on the 87?
Yes, Senator, thanks for the question. So from an engineering perspective, I'll just talk very broadly about the whole system. Dave talked about the build aspect. From a design perspective, all of our designs are found to be compliant by FAA standards. We go through a rigorous design process. We do design assurance analyses. We do risk analyses. We do probabilistic analyses. And that assures us that we have compliant design. Dave talked about the build piece of it, but on the back end, we support all of our customers with a continued operational safety process where we monitor the fleet every day, every hour of the day. Everything that should come out of our fleet is determined to be cost reportable or not. Whether if it's a cost reportable item, it goes into our safety review boards. We take action based on the individual aspect of whatever was discovered, a learning. We make a safety determination. That is all shared transparently with the FAA, and the FAA takes their own independent risk analysis based on what we've provided.
And these are airplanes that have been sold or being operated by the
These
airlines?
airplanes have been sold and been operated. We provide our operators with a robust set of operational guidance to keep the airplanes maintained, keep the airplanes repaired, and keep the airplanes supported. We also provide individual support for items that a customer and airline can't support on their own. And then the airplanes go through a rigid structure of repeated inspections over their lifetimes that are
By
also—
Boeing?
They perform these inspections per Boeing data on given their own FAA-approved maintenance practices. And so it's a constant conversation back and forth. For example, our 787—
How complex is the maintenance schedule? I mean, how many timed maintenance activities or measures are taken, you know, on a weekly basis, monthly, annual basis by the airlines?
It's multifaceted, Senator. Depending on the airplane system or structure, there are determined maintenance intervals and cycles for different aspects of the airplanes to be inspected at different times. Depending on the airplane, it's what we call limited validation or its life cycle. There are prescribed structural inspections that occur for the 87, for example, 6 years, 12 years, and onward. Those are major structural inspections, but there are interval structural inspections for particular parts of the airplane at regular intervals. For different systems, there are regular intervals to check for individual aspects of each individual system. So it's not a single response, it's multiple.
And if maintenance is required prior to those safety checks or scheduled maintenance, that gets written up, and Boeing is aware of that, and you bring that into your safety systems and report that to the FAA?
Yeah, our airlines conduct and operate very robust, and again, FAA-approved maintenance practices. If they should have a finding in one of their maintenance practices, they will absolutely report it to us. It'll enter our cost system, and then we'll make determinations based on the results of those analyses on whether those maintenance practices need to be adjusted to maintain compliance and safety.
Briefly, what does the pilot do? Or what does the flight crew do before every day or every flight?
Well, they do their regimen of pre-flight checks. They do their, and every airline has their own prescribed pre-flight checks. They're based on Boeing flight crew operating procedures, but the airlines have the option to define their own for their particular operation. But the pilots go through their pre-flight checks on the airplane. They check the various systems, understand status lights, hazard lights, everything else that might appear in the flight deck.
And all systems have to be go, or we're sitting there at the ground stop and waiting for the maintenance.
Correct. We also have what's called a minimum equipment list that allows airplanes to be dispatched if not every single system is working, but enough are working to provide absolute safe operation. And the airlines operate with that as well as part of the cadre of data that they use to support daily operation. And of course, we are listening to all of the airlines in the world that operate our airplanes on 24/7 clock.
And again, that's why I'd like to get the airline, the CEOs or some representatives come in here and describe that for us. Again, try and set people's minds at ease, but
And along those lines, if I might mention,
your microphone?
along those lines, if I might mention, relative to the 87, the structural reviews that Howard referred to, 6 years, 12 years, many of those airplanes have been through those reviews. And we have not had an airplane that has had a better structural integrity than those airplanes as they move through there. Perfect
You're
record,
saying
pretty
the
much a perfect record,
The 787, you're saying?
787, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Calhoun, just to come back to you, isn't a big part of this story not just what's happened at Boeing in the last year or two, but what's happened over the last 20, what the C-suite has done to this company? Let me give you an example. This is from the Atlantic magazine last month. For nearly 40 years, the company, Boeing, built the 737 fuselage itself in the same plant that turned out its B-29 and B-52 bombers. In 2005, it sold this facility to a private investment firm. Offloading, Boeing called it. The tail, the landing gear, the flight controls, and other essentials were outsourced to factories around the world, owned by others, and then just shipped to Boeing for final assembly. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to, with consent, have this article, Boeing in the Dark Age of American Manufacturing.
Without objection.
You now have at least 600 direct suppliers worldwide. Who knows how many subcontractors? You've got 35 direct suppliers in China alone. I mean, hasn't this really been the hollowing out of Boeing?
Senator Hawley, I think the decision that we have made with respect to Spirit Aero and our determination to bring it back into the Boeing fold is definitely a vote in favor of vertical integration.
That's one.
I can't comment on all of the ones of the past. And we have not had the number of issues in those that we are currently dealing with respect to our fuselage. So I can't rewrite history, but I can take action
you're in charge
forward.
you're in charge of the company. I'm just asking you. You're in charge of a company. You're getting paid $33 million a year. You're in charge of a company that has systematically, over decades now, shipped out its jobs, shipped out its production. Over the last decade, while you've either been in charge as CEO or on the board, stock prices have rose 600% at Boeing. You've, in fact, done $59 billion in returning cash to shareholders, $20 billion of that in dividends, $39 billion of that in stock buyback. Some people are doing great here. I'm just wondering, given the fact that your airplanes are falling out of the sky, do you think that any of that has to do with the fact that you really don't make that much anymore in this country or in-house? I mean, hasn't it been a mistake to hollow out the company and ship your production and your manufacturing and your know-how to other places around the world instead of doing it yourself, the American engineers, American workers?
Senator Hawley, I think I read an annual report going all the way back to the introduction of the 747, which highlighted the fact that 65% of that airplane would be sourced by U.S. manufacturers here and there. And the other thing I do know that since 2015, again, I don't have all that history but before that, we have actually brought more work to the U.S. than we have taken out of the U.S. And at an absolute level, our work in the U.S. is in the high 80%. And that is unlike any other industry I have ever worked in.
These are your suppliers, you're saying? These
Yes.
are your subcontractors,
Yes.
right? The ones who are using Dawn dish soap to test their doors and cheesecloth to test the plugs, right? Those, Your CFO, Brian West, recently went on the record and said that Boeing probably got a little too far ahead of itself on the topic of outsourcing. You agree with that?
He was speaking directly to our decision to go after Spirit.
So he was right?
He was speaking directly to our decision to vertically integrate Spirit.
So he was right. You got too far ahead of yourself on outsourcing for all of these years. Is Boeing going to change course on this?
We are most certainly changing course on Spirit.
You've got 32,000 machinists. These are American workers who work for you. These are Boeing employees in the Pacific Northwest. You're in contract negotiations with them right now. 32,000, that's a lot of them. The last time that they got a contract was 16 years ago. Do you remember the terms of that contract?
I don't. It was a very long contract.
Yeah, well, they got 1% wage increases over 8 years. 1% over 8 years. You got a 45% increase just last year, and you're making $33 million. You think maybe these folks deserve a raise?
Oh, they will definitely get a raise.
Good, good. I hope it's a substantial one. And I hope that maybe this will be an opportunity for Boeing, under new leadership, to reverse course and actually start making things again, start making things in this country again, and start paying its people well. I've listened to your testimony, and it seems like the gist of it seems to be that if you could just get your employees to comply, follow the rules, follow your management techniques, et cetera, things would be better. I don't think the problem's with the employees.
Oh, it's
actually.
not. It is
yeah,
not.
I think the
agree.
problem's with you. You. It's the C-suite. It's the management. It's what you've done to this company. That's where the problem is. The problem's at the top. Your engineers, they're probably the best in the world. Your machinists, they're outstanding. You're the problem. And I just hope to God that you don't destroy this company before it can be saved. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Hawley. I want to talk about specific problems that apparently continue to exist. Have you read or heard recently about rolls that the MAX has suffered?
I have, sir.
What's the story?
Well, Senator, it's the NTSB is involved, and they will investigate the hypotheses that we're aware of will not involve the manufacturer of the airplane.
Well, what is the cause of those rolls? It's the same phenomenon that occurred before that Ethiopian airplane crash.
No, sir. And I have to let the NTSB do their work. They will conclude it.
What about fasteners improperly used?
Yes, Senator. So clarification on the fasteners. These are fasteners that are common to the side of body for the 787. All the fasteners are installed. All the fasteners are torqued to the proper torque specifications. The subtlety here is they were torqued using the head side of the fastener as opposed to the nut side. And so we are redoing the analysis to understand if that has any safety implications. All three of the submodels of the 787s will be analyzed. The first submodel was analyzed.
So there may be a problem there.
It's completely acceptable. The first submodel analysis shows completely acceptable. The torque is the right torque.
Completely acceptable or unacceptable?
Acceptable.
What does that mean?
It's fine the way it is. The torque is applied properly. All the fasteners are installed.
Well, that doesn't give me a lot of reassurance that they're not installed properly, but it's acceptable.
The fasteners are all installed. All the fasteners are torqued to the appropriate torque specifications. The specification asked that the torque be applied on the head side of the fastener, on the nut side of the fastener, and they were applied to the head side of the fastener. It's just a matter of what's being held and what's being turned. So all the fasteners are there, and the torque is appropriate.
Maybe you can tell us about the causes of that Southwest airline rolling because damage was done to the plane, correct?
Senator, it is under NTSB investigation. As Dave mentioned, we are pulling together the data that we have, and it does not indicate that there is anything that is a fleet concern here. We think there's a unique circumstance around this particular airplane that has nothing to do with design or manufacturing. But we'll need the NTSB to complete their investigation and share.
What are you going to do about it?
Well, we're supporting the NTSB and we're supporting the customer with
You're
any.
not looking into it yourselves?
We are, Senator. We're supporting the NTSB investigation with our design resources.
Aren't you alarmed that airplanes manufactured by Boeing are rolling in this very dramatic and potentially unsafe way, doing damage to the planes that you've manufactured?
Senator, the Dutch roll is an oscillation due to the rudder actuator responding to a particular circumstance that it's in. We think it's an individual circumstance for this airplane that thus far, given the data we have, indicates that this airplane underwent some unique circumstance that is particular to this airplane, and it doesn't give us any cause for concern for the fleet.
I'm told that the MAX engine's anti-icing system can't be kept on for more than 5 minutes in dry air without risking a potentially catastrophic engine failure. Is that true?
Senator, it's a particular situation where you're at altitude on a particularly hot day, which is a very, very remote circumstance, and you've kept the MAX anti-ice on, or the engine anti-ice on, for too long of a period. That gives rise to a probabilistic exposure of some deterioration of the inlet. It's when we look at it through our cost process, we conduct a functional hazard analysis and a fault tree. We've established the probability of that occurring. It's extremely remote. At the same time, we're taking all efforts to redesign that. But again, because of its extremely remote probability, we believe the fleet is safe.
Where I'm going with these questions is that there seems to be a kind of laundry list of incidents caused by a series of manufacturing or design problems, and the company isn't grappling with them in the very proactive and vigorous way that the public would expect when you're putting airplanes at risk.
Senator, every single item that comes out of our 24/7 fleet monitoring goes through our continued operational safety program and is individually assessed through a rigorous analytical set of processes that is overseen by the FAA. Safety determinations are made on a continual basis, and those safety determinations are again overseen by the FAA using their independent analyses for corroboration.
Well, again, we come back to what you're telling the FAA, which was fraudulent when that deferred prosecution agreement was reached, and may now again result in prosecution in unrelated instances of what you've told the FAA. Let me ask you, Mr. Calhoun, have you heard that non-conforming parts are installed in any Boeing airplanes?
We have a process, Senator, to ensure that no non-conforming part is
But
in an
two
airplane.
whistleblowers have told us that likely non-conforming, meaning damaged or defective parts, were installed. And at the very least, they were hidden from the FAA.
Senator, I read that complaint this morning. I do know and had followed up that the speak-up had been received in our system and that the quality team has been and is looking. So more than happy to get back to you on that. I apologize. I'm personally not involved in it. I just saw it this morning.
I would hope that you would. You don't know of a single instance of any discipline for retaliation, is that correct? That's what you said earlier.
I said that we have taken action on people who we have determined to have retaliated, but I did not have the number.
Can you tell me about one?
I'm not going to tell you about one, sir. We have a process. It works.
Well, I beg to differ. It's not working.
Okay.
It's not working. You know it's not working. Let me tell you, because you've read this deposition, about what John Barnett said about one employee. Question: Mr. Barnett, are you aware of ever hearing about any employees being physically assaulted for raising safety complaints? Answer: Barnett answering, actually, I have heard of one. The name is blank, was telling me about a time that she was dealing with, the other person's name is also redacted, and he was pushing her to work outside the procedures. And she told me that he actually put his arm against her and pushed her against the wall and was pointing to her in her face and telling her to get on board, and this was a good old boys program or something like that. End of quote. You read that.
Yes, sir.
Did you look into it?
So this happened a very long time ago.
Well,
Yes.
did you look into it?
And it happened a long time ago. I started in 2020. It's horrible. It's a tragic end. I don't know what else to say.
Well, I understand your feelings of regret about it, but what's needed here is action. There are a series of whistleblower complaints. There are a collection of retaliation actions, and there's been no action on them. Now, you submitted a plan that sounds very much like the 90-day plan or the plan that the company submitted previously. I'm going to put up the 90-day plan that you submitted. This is what you agreed with the FAA to do in 2015. I'm just taking 4 examples. Your 90-day plan basically recycles those ideas. I asked you, my very first question, has the company done enough? I submit the answer based on this chart, and the comparison is the company's done virtually nothing. It's making more of the same promises. It's recycling the same old ideas without having taken action. You disagree?
Yeah, Senator, again, I started in 2020. I don't think I've ever taken, or our "I's" the wrong word. We as a leadership team could have taken any more dramatic steps than we've taken. Howard described what has happened within the engineering function. We stood it up on its own. We created important design practices that would address directly the development and design of every next airplane so that we would never design an MCAS again. And it would include a very comprehensive look at human factors, pilots, all those interactions. We hired 60 pilots, experienced pilots, to travel the world and meet with our experienced and least experienced airlines to talk to them about what they need to see in our airplanes. The list goes on. The safety management system basically started and designed and attached to the cost program that Howard discussed, which is to listen to every airplane every day, every second as one takes off, so that we can hear and then evaluate and support our customers to improve safety every day. And safety does get better every day.
We mentioned earlier that only one person has been prosecuted as a result of the criminality, in my view, criminality, in the Justice Department's view, criminality, that was involved in the 2 crashes, 2018, 2019. The basic practice, the modus operandi, it seems to me, of the company is to shift blame downward, to, in effect, scapegoat workers rather than the management team responsible ultimately for conducting the company. Recently, in fact, just weeks ago, when a Boeing employee spoke up about the falsification of records for tests performed during the assembly of the 787 in South Carolina, this was speaking up about falsification of records to the FAA, a violation of that deferred prosecution agreement. In effect, Boeing blamed the employee and said, and I'm quoting from the letter that Boeing submitted to the FAA, quote, "The employee misconduct was so obviously outside the bounds of clearly articulated and broadly understood company requirements that their intent should not be imputed to the company." The same letter says that the root cause of the falsification has not been determined. You familiar with that letter?
Senator, this issue, I will start with the employee who observed a practice and raised his hand and brought it to our attention. A team of very qualified engineers, because this was not a simple determination to come to, within a day, got to the determination that this employee misrepresented his work directly. That is unacceptable, and disciplinary actions will be handed out, and it'll be quick.
But what about the managers who may have known about it? Have you begun an investigation?
Oh, there will be a line right up with respect to the managers, but this was a misrepresentation.
I'm going to ask the ranking member whether he has any other questions.
I'm fine.
You know, we are running out of time, and you have promised to get back to us with information that I think this committee needs and deserves, but will you also commit to respond fully and transparently to the request for documents that we've made instead of what you and I have agreed is gobbledygook?
Yeah, Senator, I will look hard at that. The answer is yes.
I'm going to take you at your word. You know, I think what this hearing has shown is we all on this panel want Boeing to do well and succeed, but that requires a course correction. It requires a correction of that broken safety culture, more than just about a single aircraft or single factory or individual. And I think that there has to be a change in more than a single manager. Wouldn't you agree that a team of managers has to be held responsible for this kind of losing record?
Senator, we have made a very significant number of changes, starting with the tragedies that occurred. We have a whole new board, engineering representatives on that board, airplane experience on that board, safety on that board, replaced every single leader across the executive leadership team between 2020 and where we are today. And then we took actions with respect to the Alaska accident, specific to the MAX 737 production program. I do believe in accountability. I do believe in it. And even it's hard to administer, but I believe in it. And we have been working hard at that.
Would you agree that there has to be more accountability?
Senator, I am doing everything in my power. If I agreed, then I would have done something more. I I have
you're-
done everything I
you're
believe
leaving.
is required. I am leaving.
Leaving
Yes, sir.
at the end of this year.
Yes.
But people in the current board or management structure, in effect, are filling positions that are open, same individuals. Wouldn't you agree there has to be more accountability and a different team?
Not the same individuals. We try to select people who know a lot about airplanes. We are an industry where domain expertise matters a lot. And so we do prefer to choose from within, but we also do our best to match the skill sets with the opportunity at hand. Right now, the immediate opportunity, and I think your committee has helped us point this out, along with everything we've learned in the stand-downs and accident, engagement, 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 engagement. Trust with our workforce. That I understand. And the people that we have selected to fill these jobs were based on that spec and that spec alone.
Well, I think that you've certainly demonstrated that you can talk about these changes, but making the changes may well require a different team. And accountability is very important for the past, but also going forward for the future. So I look forward to hearing more from Boeing. I look forward to hearing from the airlines, as the ranking member has suggested. And we are going to pursue many of these issues because they are a matter of life and death. And they have profound consequences to our economy and to the traveling public. And again, I want to thank everyone in the audience, particularly those who have been personally affected. And I think we want to continue to encourage whistleblowers to come forward and protecting them from retaliation. The committee record will remain open for 10 days, and the hearing is adjourned.
Thank you, Senator.